Welcome to the panel on interoperability, finding the key to success. My name is Feres, I'm the organizer of Crypto Hub Malta, the blockchain native community here in Malta. We are here at metaNEXT exploring the Web3, and interoperability might be the final frontier limiting the space today. This is what we're going to talk about this. Now, before we start the discussion, the panel discussion, I just want to explain why this is the major challenge today. Blockchains are by design very safe, but that is because the encryption is self-referring, meaning blockchains cannot talk to one another. Bitcoin cannot talk to Ethereum, and Avalanche cannot talk to Solana. This was very much like the beginning of the internet, where it was difficult to connect the different computers. So today, a blockchain is like a computer, but without an internet connection. Now, if one blockchain cannot talk to another, none of them can natively talk to off-chain data. And off-chain data is what we call reality, or the rest of the world. So that is quite a big limitation. I am very excited to introduce now to you our esteemed panelists. They all have a different background and are industry experts working with this challenge on a day-to-day basis. We have from nChain, Ishii, from Riva, Jonathan Arthur, and from Metaverse architect Ellul. Now, let's jump right into it. I have the first question for and that is, why is interoperability in the Metaverse space important for the gaming industry?
Great. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be joining this panel. My name is Ishii, Business Development at nChain. We are IT solution provider, and we're working in financial sector, gaming, both land-based and online. And we're also working with public sector, so CBDC, etc. And my personal focus is gambling, because I've been in the industry for 4 years. I learned the industry from the content provider perspective, and now we are using tokenization to cut operational costs for KYC, affordability checks, and we're using the same technology for the Unicorn project, the single customer view. We're also trying to notarize all the AML activities and player protection activities. So, enough with the introduction. So the answer to your question, I think that interoperability between blockchains, that's one thing. But what I think is really interesting for the gaming people is the interoperability between players, casinos, sports betting sites, and in the digital world. So the industry has transformed from the land-based only to omni-channel with the iGaming part. And I think it's a good time for the industry to consider loyalty programs using NFTs. So when we say Metaverse and NFTs, people are always thinking about, I don't want to spend time behind a VR headset. I don't want to be part of this risky speculations. But it's much more than that. So, for example, $120 billion have been invested in this space this year alone, and that's an eye-opening amount of money. And companies like Google, Meta, Microsoft, Epic Games, who is a creator of Fortnite or Unreal Engine. So these companies are investing heavily, and some of the companies have already proved to be very profitable. For example, Dapper Labs, they had a really successful NFT project, and they reached a total sales volume of $1 billion back in May. And what they sold was a highlight of NBA famous scenes. So, for example, LeBron James' famous dunk from 2020 finals, this was sold with a price tag of $400,000. You think it's a bit crazy that people will spend so much money, but they have successfully tapped into people's desire to own their favorite players on court moments. And now they are partnering up with UFC, NFL, so they want to do more of these success cases. So if you, for example, operate online casino or a betting site, and maybe you are sponsoring some sports team, it's natural for you to think about how are we going to tap into that, the NFT's properties. So the ownership and the scarcity. If you have the LeBron James dunk, that's yours. Nobody else has that. And also the fan base, the strong community that you can actually excite. Those three things are what makes NFT very special. So, think about what you can do with it. Maybe you want to reward season ticket holders by creating an NFT, and then you can convert it into a real life event. You throw a networking event or party. Those things can actually excite people, innovate your loyalty program, and get your players and your community much, much closer to your brand. So this is how I see why interoperability matters.
I see there's lots of new opportunities of engagement with clients and different projects to build the community in a new way.
Absolutely.
Jonathan, you're an NFT consultant now. Imagine I'm curious about the Metaverse, but I don't know how to navigate the different blockchains, the multi-chain reality that we're living in right now. What advice would you give to me if I start to explore the space?
Yeah, well, first it's really about finding your target customer and understanding who you're trying to reach. Within the different blockchains, you could say they're almost like micro-nations. So they all have very different characteristics, whereas if you're launching maybe a decentralized finance product, maybe Avalanche is the place for you because they've had a really flourishing DeFi scene. But maybe if you're fine art, I would recommend going into more something like Tezos. Tezos is a smaller chain, maybe you haven't heard of it, but their art scene is just incredible. They do little pop-ups in LA, they just really have mind-blowing art, and actually at a pretty cheap price, so if you're a collector now, I would take a look. But yeah, it's really about finding your target customer, and then from there, we'll tailor the consulting to find the right chain for you. Because yeah, like you said, we are living in a multi-chain reality right now, and hopefully there will be more interoperability in the future.
So what you're saying is instead of starting with the blockchain, you start with the community and then
Exactly.
you dive into the space.
Yeah.
Okay. Sean, you're an architect in the Metaverse, most notably in Decentraland. Now let's say I want to have a digital representation of my business in the Metaverse. How would I go along?
All right, so that's a really, really good question. What we primarily do, our business is structured on two fronts. We do consultancy and we build. We call ourselves architects, but more in the matrix sense, where we both code and develop experiences. So primarily we try and activate clients to be able to take them from the ideation phase all the way to the deployment phase. And like you perfectly placed it, John, every single client is different, has different needs, different expectations, different requirements that you need to place into that specific type of architecture. So I would say the very first step, whether it's consultancy or whether it's ideation, is trying to really take a deep dive with regards to what the business goals are behind this investment. I see a lot of businesses taking a step into the metaverse without analyzing direct KPIs with regards to the ROI that they can achieve with regard to this investment, and more often than not, it just ends up being a marketing stunt, which is a pity, because the majority of brands, Metaverse Architects is working with now, so apologies, is exposed to so many more opportunities, both in the field of being involved in DAO management, for example, with policy generation with regards to governance, being able to build infrastructure on the platform that could extend their services into Web3. So it's about having this deep dive where you try and analyze how the business is currently working, start developing KPIs for that said MVP that can allow that said business to achieve their business goals, but then being, you can even call it bold or naive enough to pitch the idea that there needs to be a long-term macro strategy with regards to shifting the risk management of these technologies from a potentially disruptive risk to opportunity risk, and saturating that opportunity risk as much as possible with regards to what kind of return that they can get on their investment. And that is tailored to every single client. So even looking at the past clients we had that I can talk about, Forever 21, for example, was very different to launching the first ATM in the Metaverse, or the tallest tower in the Metaverse. When we built all those different projects, each one had a different purpose, a different use case, a different KPI. And I think that's incredibly important, especially when the industry is so embryonic, and we mostly know what we don't know, rather than the opposite.
Yeah, that was really insightful. Maybe a question to all of you, and it's something that Sean mentioned. How do you guide someone to the substance of the utility of the technology as opposed to a mere marketing stunt?
I can go.
You just all.
I mean, you really need to understand your client, and you need to have a value-first approach. So this is why I love the environment we're working in at Metaverse Architects, because we're primarily builders. And we're not builders with the mentality of, let's just host a scene. We're there to build the future of the internet. We're there to analyze what the pain points for interoperability are. We're there to analyze the pain points of scaling traffic in the metaverse. We're one of the most active parties in the management of the Decentraland DAO. We're managing a treasury of 222 million man. We're there to primarily aid in building out this infrastructure. And there's nothing better to do than ignoring all the volatility, ignoring the market and all the noise that comes with it, and analyzing these technologies for the inherent value that they can provide on a systemic level to sociological constructs that have been long withstanding in the way we do things, both from the perspective of decision-making, governance, and finance. So it's about understanding the tech and the value behind it inherently, and attempting to analyze how you can bridge the gap between these long-established clients with regard to them making use of this technology from an innovative standpoint. Build new ideas, build new technology, and have the bravery to fail if needs be with regards to developing those new set of ideas.
If I can add, I think that to tie the online and the real life is really important. So Bored Ape Yacht Club is a really successful NFT project, and then they sold about $2 billion. And you're not just paying millions of dollars for an ape. You're actually buying a ticket to a very exclusive community. You might be partying with Steph Curry. Who doesn't want that? Mark Cuban and all these Snoop Dogs. All these guys are the members of this community, and they often throw real-life events. They have networking parties, and they do collaborate. They do business together. So, there is a connection between having a digital asset and then tying it to a real-life event. I think that this is a successful combination.
That is such a valid point, because, well, it started with monkey pictures, and they're lovely, but actually, at one point, we need to connect to the real world. Blockchains, they can now talk to one another, but they can also not talk to reality. I mentioned this in the introduction. So what you're saying is the substance is also in the bridge between the blockchain space or the Web3 application space and the real world.
Yeah, I wanted to hop in and echo a little bit about what Sean said, because over the past year there's been a lot of noise. You're waiting in line at Starbucks for maybe it's a pumpkin spice latte, it's the season, right? And next thing you know, the barista is talking about NFTs. Maybe now it's more appropriate because they've introduced a loyalty program, but things have calmed down a lot. So it's a great opportunity to find the real value. It's not about those marketing or even worse, cash grabs that we've seen a lot of celebrities take part in, which is super unfortunate because those are the people that take advantage of the investor who I would say doesn't really take the time to do the research. Now we're at a point where we could really focus on how could we add value. You know, how does digitally verifiable assets, you know, with provable ownership, add value to your customer base. And so I think there's a ton of opportunity in these months that are to come as the noise has settled a little.
I see, like, you have an advantage of having those famous people joining a certain project and promoting it, but it also has disadvantages. However, from what I understand in Decentraland, this is mostly based on extended community corporations, right?
Totally. So, the reason why Decentraland is so interesting, if you guys look into Decentraland now, you're not going to see much. It's not polished. It's not that good. What's exciting about it is its management. It's community-led projects. Earlier today, there was Vegas City, for example, talking over here, and they're one of the most interesting builders in the space as well. Why? Decentraland primarily works by governance systems being built in place in a DAO. You have a decentralized autonomous organization. You have $250 million in a treasury, and a young kid like me from Malta can have access to decision-making in this billion-dollar project, impact it with my ideas, with my contribution, build in the space, and have a say. And that in itself is innately revolutionary. The fact that you have grassroots level projects being built from the ground up by community members and being able, the community is funding itself with regards to the infrastructure they would like to build in the very space they both co-own, co-manage, and co-inhabit. And this is extremely embryonic. Like, if this was 1996 and I was talking to you about websites and the internet, I would have no means to be able to include the disruption that mobile phones are going to bring to the market and how they can apply to the consumer with regard to the value they can bring. So who am I in my position, like, to be able to understand what implications these technologies might have in the future with the development of interesting hardware? What we are seeing, though, is these frameworks that are being built, especially with regards to the decentralization of decision-making, can have profound effects, not just in the metaverse, but beyond, especially with the running of NGOs, for example, or decision-making in the whole.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say, like, just to reel it back in a little bit, we're talking about interoperability, and at its core, this is interoperability. It's interoperability between people. You know, these are open source projects that people could come in and, like, I actually work heavily in the crypto and NFT space under a pseudonym. You know, I'm operating in that space. No one knows my real name. They don't know what university I did or didn't go to, what my research, professional experiences. They know what work I've done. You know, and maybe that's through hackathons, or maybe that's through creating a cute avatar in Decentraland. And that's what I really love about Web3 and crypto, is that it kind of neutralizes the playing field, I would say.
Absolutely. You know, Web2's problem is, for example, if you log into a site using your Facebook credentials, then Facebook can see so much about your activity on that site. And Web3 is about levering that, you know, and then giving the power back to the people. And you have the decision-making opportunity, and you get to decide what to do with your data. And one of the projects that's happening is, so medical records, for example. So pharmaceutical companies are paying a lot of money to access your data, health data. For example, a scan of your brain, to access it once, they are paying $500 for it. And what do people get from that? Nothing. But if we develop this project further and then make sure that the data is being used for the right research and for the pharmaceuticals to come up with the right treatment for the people, and then for the people to also make money from, you know, their data, is really powerful. When I was in college, I was so broke, and I used to donate my blood. and then I used to do patch test. I don't know if any of you did this, but if I had a choice to sell my biometric profile to make some side money, I would probably do that. So this is another way to give back the power to the people.
I think we're talking about two different sides of the same coin. The one is the front end, that's what Sean is talking about, the metaverse that we can see and observe, and I is talking about the data backend, because you mostly work with data. I want to ask a question to the audience just to get a feeling. Can you please raise your hand if you've been to the metaverse or if you've seen the metaverse that we're talking about here in theory? Raise your hand, just so we have an idea. Okay, so you've probably seen what Sean is referring to as like an early version of the metaverse. Just bear that in mind next time you're in the space. I also want to say something else, because we talk about decentralized identity and being anonymous on the internet. You cannot see our pictures here from the conference profile, but two of us on this panel actually used a metaverse avatar. So that's already half of the panelists, so we're getting there. Now, we're almost coming to an end. This is why I would like to ask all of you the same closing question. And it's a question that is probably why most of you are here, that are curious why interoperability is at the key right now finding success in the metaverse space. So the question goes, Sean, maybe you go first and then we go reverse order. What will it take to implement interoperability in the Web3 in the future?
Can I ask two questions and raise your hands very quickly, because this is important for me? It's with regards to data. How many of you distrust Facebook or Meta as a company with regards to how they use your data? Raise your hands. How many of you have heard, just heard, I don't care if you trust them or not, of the company Tencent? Raise your hand. Half the room. Half the room. That's good. That's part of it. We need to know what's going on. We need to understand interoperability not just as something that's Web3 focused, but something that's Web1. That's something that's inherent into the base of the purpose of the internet itself. We need communication between our different platforms. We need to sustain the livelihood of those platforms, especially in outages. And we need data sovereignty to the maximum degree that is held by the consumer and the individual. So it's a long-term fight, but blockchain technologies do give us a lot of tools to be able to solve problems that have been there since Web1 and have been catastrophic in at least the positioning of Web2.
Jonathan, please.
Yeah, bringing interoperability to life is going to come with a lot of UI and UX improvements. I think we need a lot more ease of use when it comes to using the blockchain. It's already hard enough as it is to set up a MetaMask, let alone bridging assets from Ethereum to Avalanche. You could get a small heart attack when you're bridging. So I really think that we're going to need a lot more UI and UX improvements, and time will come, a lot more education as well. Things like this, these spaces are vital for the space to grow and for people to learn.
This is why we're here.
Yeah, so thank you.
Ishii, last question, same question to you. What will it take to implement interoperability in the Web3?
I mostly agree, with both of you. Blockchain is just a backend technology. So if we subscribe to a standardized interface that communicates with the users, it's quite easy. So I think we will get there quite soon. What's really important is identity management, because if you're in and out of Metaverse trying to move digital assets or cryptocurrencies, to have a seamless identity that travels with you is going to be really crucial. So, tokenizing your KYC is one example, or having a data passport that travels with you that has your information, and that also has a function to reveal selective information to protect your privacy. Sorry, I know we are on.
It's fine, it's fine.
But for example,
we'll fight till the end with them, huh?
Great. So one of the properties of blockchain is pseudo-anonymity. So you don't. So for example, UK government is trying to pass this bill called Online Harms Bill, and all the websites that are considered harmful will need to check their age. So we're using this identity management system for also that. So tobacco, alcohol, CBD, weapon like knives, and porn content are all categorized as harmful. And when you access these websites, you need to validate your age. But you don't want Pornhub to know your identity, you just want Pornhub to know that you're over 18. So this is an example of pseudo-anonymity that can really make this digital identity quite robust. And so that's what it takes for us to achieve interoperability.
Really good point. Before we're going to finish this panel, we are going to have 1 or 2 questions from the audience, because those guys are wicked smart, but so are you. So, are there any questions here? Raise your hand and speak up. Question over there?
Hello guys, thank you, fantastic presentation and everything, and the discussion was amazing. I have plenty of questions. I want to stand to 2 topics actually. One that I mentioned about offering our like biometrics or like personal data for a price, yeah? And then we say like, okay, medical companies and the healthcare systems and whatnot, they're paying good money for that to other sources, like to get that kind of data. The question is like, what would happen if we suddenly say like, okay, we don't give access to any of our biometric data or anything? What would happen to the R&D and like how the medical progress or the like pills, any pharmaceutical pretty much would progress over there? That's one question. Would it like kind of like backlash? And the other topic is about the NFTs. The other question is about the NFTs and the ownership of the NFTs. UK is the only country right now that they're kind of trying to pass a bill over there to allow the actual ownership of these digital assets. No other country so far have made any steps towards that, which pretty much means that you don't owe anything in reality, right? Yes, exactly. Which is also something like that is like written in the fine lines of OpenSea and whatnot. So how do we go about those 2 topics?
I would say first question for you, second question for John.
So we're now working with our partners in healthcare sector, and their biggest pain points is that they do not get access to any patient record. So 40%, only 40% of diabetic patients are getting the right treatment, because the pharmaceutical companies do not have enough data, and they are giving one-size-fits-all type of treatment at the moment, which is, obviously not right. So that's the current stage. And when we introduce the option for the users to say, yes, I want to share my data, and I also want to be compensated for that, then it really opens the door. And to anonymize and pseudo-anonymize the patient data is the key, because the hospitals have a really strong firewalls that they do not want to share the data. But by pseudo-anonymizing it and hiding the privacy helps. And I also think that if some people say, I don't want to share my data, that's great, At least we have a say in it.
Brilliant answer.
Second question, Jonathan?
Yeah, when it comes to ownership, you have to look at what is an NFT. An NFT is lines of code. And if you're buying a sketchy NFT, this NFT, these lines of codes are pointing to an image. Hopefully it's hosted on a decentralized platform like IPFS. But if it's a sketchy NFT, someone could even change that in an image after you've bought it. And when it comes to ownership with the government and all that, well, all I could say is if you have a Bored Ape that you just sold for $500,000 and you try to take that money out, I'm sure the government is going to be pretty happy to take some of that money from you. So it feels like you did own it in that right? But yeah.
Great. Do we maybe have one urgent question? Somebody sitting there with something they really want to know? Now's your time to raise your hand. Right here in the front.
Hi, so this one's for Jonathan. So how do you think NFTs and the Metaverse will affect the value and ownership of art within the next few years?
Well, I'm not here to give financial advice, but I do think that it will only, I only think it's bullish, right? Imagine that you could go to a museum in the Metaverse. You know, art is such, at times, a big thing. You know, shipping it around the world is very expensive. Insurance is very expensive. There's so many private collectors that just keep this in cellars. And not even private collectors, museums as well. I have thousands of NFTs in my pocket right now that I'm happy to show you and sell you. Some of them are on a discount. But yeah, I think it's a very good thing for art in the Metaverse.
Sean, you want to add something?
Please add. That's a brilliant question. And I think the question we need to ask as well is what is value in that regard? Because I think traditionally we think of the market, but in truth, the platform, the tools, the traffic, the decentralization, the exposure, these are all opportunities for artists to bring unique value to the table that allow them to experiment, grow, and display their art in a space where it can be recognized. We build tools on that as well to be able to decentralize, or at least empower artists to be able to own their art in perpetuity. The industry just develops. So I wouldn't look at value as price of different art pieces going up or whatnot, more as it's a tool and valuable to content creators.
Yeah, it could be emotional value, right? So maybe I don't want my painting to be sitting on top of a white backdrop, right? Maybe I want it to be in a flaming volcano with unicorns running around.
And it's similar to TikTok in that sense. Like, I think one thing we really overlooked with that platform is that what drove its growth isn't just the dopamine-infused addiction of consuming short content on it, but rather the content creation tools provided to younger generations so that they can do video editing at ease and pump out content in mass. So when you provide that kind of infrastructure value for people to generate content and also drive traffic, it just works. Range is great.
Great reply, great closing question. The panelists are not going to vanish after this, so take advantage, say hello to them before they actually leave Malta. Thanks for now.